Hey everyone, this is Jonathan with EthStaker, and we're here for community call number 50. And we have today the team with Rescue Node to talk with us and learn about this really cool service, public good service that is out there and that they've been working on for some time now. And from the Rescue Node team, we have Patches, we have Ken, and we have Popash. So thank you both, each of you, for joining us. And what we're going to do in this call is review what this is and what tool this is available for Ethereum stakers, and a little bit about its history, how it came to be, and the newest thing about it being that EthStaker and Rescue Node are partnering together now in a way so that EthStaker can help support this project existing and being a great valuable public good for the community. So we wanted to take this opportunity to highlight it and highlight the team here and give them opportunity to. We can start maybe with each of you guys introducing yourselves, and then we can get into discussing it. So Patches, how about should we start? Can we start with you in intros?
Sure, I'm Patches. I am a ETH staker, a home staker. I helped build the rescue node. I am currently working with the Rocket Pool team on smart node stuff and generally just working to support the solo staking community.
Cool. Ken, how about we go with you next?
Yeah, hi. I'm Ken. I'm also a home staker here, a long-time Rocket Pool community member and rocket scientist that helps work on a number of projects. And I did some of the early work on showing some of the beneficial returns of using smoothing pools for home stakers.
Nice. All right, and Pupash, how about you? I think we might be muted in the Zoom. There we go.
Sorry. So yeah, I'm a home staker as well. I've been part of the Rocket Pool community since early 2021. I've been helping out in every way I can. I've helped out a bunch in support. I've helped Patches build the rescue node. I've been a bit away from Rocket Pool. I have not been as involved as in the past, but I still keep up with the news, So yeah, I'm still pretty much involved with Rocket Pool and staking.
Cool. Okay. Um, well then how about Patches, we get into what you wanted to cover with just reviewing what this is for people, for anyone who isn't familiar, and then kind of set the stage in that way.
Sure, I'm gonna start my slides. Share that. Okay. You good?
Looking good.
Slides up. Okay, so the rescue node is a trust minimized public beacon node, and we sort of use the words trust minimized to be explicit about the fact that it isn't trustless, but it is a public beacon node, meaning that if your beacon node isn't operational, you can still attest through the rescue node as long as your validator client is online. And there were some security challenges making that possible in the first place that we had to tackle that I'll get into a little bit later, but it's secure enough so that the only people you're trusting are the maintainers. At least, that's how we've built it. And if there are no bugs in it, that's how it works. So it was originally created by Popash, actually, who is on this call, which I'm super psyched about. There's a picture of him behind my face on this slide, unfortunately. He made it before the merge, and before the merge, we had a lot more resources for stakers. I think many of you might remember that if your node wasn't operating, you could actually just point your validator client at Infura and attest through Infura without even using a full node. After the merge, the sort of identity that is responsible for building blocks shifted from miners to stakers, and those services basically shut down because they didn't want to add endpoints that supported block building. We in the rocket pool community had relied pretty heavily on Infura as an emergency option. So Povash basically said, like, I'm going to do what I can to make a replacement for it, and that was the first version of the rescue node. I'll quickly talk about how it works. Normally, when you're staking, this is what a typical staking setup looks like, and you'll run these three applications on a single node generally, but you'll run a validator client, a consensus client, and an execution client, which all communicate with each other, and they also communicate with peers in the Ethereum network, except for the validator client, which only communicates with the consensus client. So if your consensus client is unavailable, you can actually just connect it to a different consensus client. And now your execution client and consensus client are isolated from your validator client, and you can perform maintenance on your execution client or consensus client without your validator client being offline. So this does come with a trust challenge, and I think I mentioned this briefly, but anyone with access to a public beacon node can set the fee recipient for every other validator that's using the same node. So if I connect to a public beacon node that isn't properly secured, I could have a malicious actor essentially steal any of the block rewards that I would get for proposing a block. And there's some complications in there around MEV, but for the most part, that's sort of the challenge that we were facing. So that was originally published by Adrian Sutton in a blog post in 2022. And I think Popash probably read that blog before he made the rescue node, because he has this very brilliant, like, 6 lines of Lua that he shoved into a Nginx reverse proxy. And essentially all this does is ensure that when you're connecting to this node, the only fee recipient that you set for any blocks that you propose is the Rocket Pool smoothing pool, which means that now anyone who's using the Rocket Pool smoothing pool can successfully use this node without fear of someone overriding their fee recipient and stealing their proposal fees. So in September 2022, that was when that first version was out. In October, we realized how valuable it was. A lot of people used it during the merge. If you were a staker during the merge, I think you remember it a little different from everyone else. Everyone says, "Oh, it went so smoothly," but like stakers were all running around with their hairs on fire. So it was very useful during the merge. We decided to develop out a more feature-full version of it, one that supported stakers who weren't necessarily part of the smoothing pool, so Rocket Pool node operators that hadn't opted into the smoothing pool. When we did the design, we thought about how we could eventually support solo stakers and made sure that we didn't, step on our own feet around that. In February, we launched on Crater, and then a little bit later, I think 2 weeks later, we launched on mainnet. In March of 2023, we finally added Nimbus support. Nimbus was one of the last consensus clients to offer a split validator client. In February 2023, these are out of order, aren't they? I'll have to fix that. In February 2023, we got a grant from the GMC to fund the rescue node and to pay the developers for the work that they had done. So this was a retroactive grant as well as an ongoing grant. The ongoing grant just covered the cost of maintenance, which is just the cost of the servers that we use, and the developers were paid a sort of thank you value for the work that they did. We added Lodestar support in May. In June, we released our public metrics dashboard, which lets you see how many people are connected to the rescue node, how many attestations are being published, how many blocks are being proposed, what the client breakdown is, and I can show you that later. In December of 23, we added solo staker support. And this is when I think EthStaker first sort of got excited about the project. We were excited to add it. It was a lot of extra work to support solo stakers, because with Rocket Pool node operators, the fee recipient for a given node is derived from on-chain data. If you're in the smoothing pool, then you have to use the smoothing pool as your fee recipient. And if you're not in the smoothing pool, then you use your fee distributor as the fee recipient. And those are 2 addresses that we can figure out just by querying an execution client. So it's very easy. For solo stakers, we had to find a different way to enforce fee recipients, and we ended up settling on the notion that the fee recipient should always be the withdrawal credential for the validator. So a validator with a 0x01 withdrawal credential has a specific address that the funds will be withdrawn from the beacon chain, and that's the only address we accept as a fee recipient for them, unless they're using MEV Boost, because again, MEV sort of complicates everything, but it's a little bit more secure than non-MEV Boost. So at least from the perspective of the rescue node. In October 24, we had 2 contributions from community members, one which added support for solo stakers who are using smart contracts as their withdrawal address, as long as those withdrawal address wallets, the smart contract wallets, support EIP 1271, which is the signature specification for contracts. And we had, that was from a Twitter user named Trainface. In October 24, we also had a contribution from a community member named Snowcones, which made it easier to track what your quota usage is on the rescue node. So you do get a limited number of accesses with the rescue node. And for a while, people were just flying blind and they would use them up and not realize it. And then when they needed to use the rescue node again, they would try and register and they'd get rejected. And now you can actually see when the last time you used the rescue node was, how many times you've used it, and if you've used it, like if you've used up your quota, it tells you when you will next be able to use it just by signing a message and pasting it into the UI. And that brings us to January, which is last month, when we officially started our partnership with EthStaker. As part of that partnership, we brought Yorick from EthStaker on as a maintainer of the node, and EthStaker has been helping us out on the sort of financial operations side, which has been very nice for me because I was doing it all myself before and now I don't have to, so thank you. I talked a little bit about fee recipient enforcement. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because it's deeply technical, but if you are curious, you have like a second to screenshot this. This is the logic that we use to enforce a fee recipient. For solo validators under Prepare Beacon Proposer, we just always accept the 0x01 credential. For Rocket Pool node operators, we query the execution client, like I said before, and figure out what the address should be. Every other request gets rejected. And then if you're using MEV Boost, the register validator endpoint is used instead. And the only enforcement we do on the register validator endpoint is to check if you are a Rocket Pool node operator that you're not attempting to steal MEV from the protocol. If you're a solo operator, you can use any address you want as the fee recipient here. And that's because this particular endpoint requires a signature from the validator key. So it's impossible for someone else to set your fee recipient. So we don't actually have that same security concern here. This is a breakdown of the services that we use. We're hosted on OVH. It's about $500 a month for our bare metals and 1 VPS. We have 5 bare metals because we support 5 different client types. There is interoperability between them. We could potentially pair them down. We haven't found that to be particularly reliable across versions. So we sort of just said, well, we'll just pay the extra money and have a Nimbus box and a Lighthouse box and a Prism box and a Lodestar box and a Teku box. And it costs more than we necessarily have to spend, but it also prevents bugs and frustration for people who need the rescue node. And maybe they're running Nimbus and they connect to a Teku machine and it just doesn't work. We use Cloudflare for TLS termination. For all of our sort of maintainer admin stuff, we have single sign-on through Cloudflare. They also host our website for free, which is nice. We use Grafana Cloud for our public dashboard. We're monitoring the hardware with NetData. And then on the hosts themselves, we're running HA proxy, which is essentially just an extra layer of security. And it gives us some very detailed logging, which is nice for introspection. We use Prometheus to collect metrics and monitor the hosts. We use Grafana to look at dashboards, essentially, of the sort of rescue node. We have a public one and a private one. And then there's just like a bunch of open source libraries, which I won't go into all of them that we used in the development. And then this is acknowledgements. I'm gonna very quickly go through. Popash obviously created the original proof of concept and developed components of the working platform that we use today. Ken has been an administrative help for the maintainers on patches. Yorick is now joining the list of maintainers. We had some other developers. Hani Abu made our first website. Dan McCartney made our new website. Sleety did all of our graphics. Snowcones and Trainface contributed major features. The Rocket Pool GMC continues to fund the rescue node even after we partnered with EthStaker. So now sort of the way it works is EthStaker does the financial operations and the GMC pays EthStaker, and that cuts me out of the loop, which is nice because my taxes were very complex before. And then the client teams have been very helpful. In the development of the rescue node, we discovered a few bugs and a few weird behaviors in clients, some unexpected things. And every time this happened, we would essentially just file a ticket on GitHub with the corresponding client team. And they've all been incredibly open to working with us to sort of even the playing field and make sure that all the clients behave in a similar manner. And then finally, EthStaker, also very helpful for promoting the rescue node and for taking over on the financial operations side. And that's it for slides. I can quickly pop into the public dashboard I was talking about. This is a public Grafana dashboard at stats.rescuenode.com. You can see sort of the usage of the rescue node, how many validators are connected. There are currently no solo operators connected, which is a little sad, but also good. Maybe they just don't have as many emergencies. So there's 15 Rocket Pool nodes connected with 47 validators. You see a few proposals getting published. Oh, no proposals being published.
If it's connected like that, does that mean it's like actively relying on it?
Yeah.
And okay.
So
it's like
when
presumably someone like that is doing maintenance or using it for some kind of purpose of backup, like actively right now. Okay.
Yeah. So the total number of people who have used the rescue node is in the thousands. I think it was like 2,400 last time I checked. That's deduplicated across withdrawal address for solo validators and node address for Rocket Pool operators. The total number of times people have requested access is like roughly 3 or 4 times that. And then at this current point in time, we have about 50 validators connected on about 14 nodes or 13 nodes. And those are people who are currently using the rescue node to do maintenance, or because they, had like a sync committee and their performance was poor on their own hardware or something like that. This is our website. It's at rescuenode.com. This is where you would go if you needed to use the rescue node. So you have some sort of maintenance emergency for your solo staking hardware. Say your ETH1 client's corrupted, or you want to switch clients, or again, you're in a sync committee and your hardware is underperforming. You could come here. If you're a Rocket Pool operator, there's a command you run and you paste the results, and then it gives you a token that you enter into SmartNode to get access. If you're a solo node operator, you have to connect your 0x01 credentialed wallet to the site and sign a message, which is gasless, and it essentially just proves that you are the owner of those keys. Once you submit that signed message to us, you get credentials that you can use in your validator client with a URL that we specify to connect. And then for all users, once you're connected, the amount of time that you can use the node is limited. So you have, it's over a week, but it's under 2 weeks generally to fix whatever issue you are having. And then you can also only request connections 3 or 4 times a year, depending on whether you're a solo operator or a Rocket Pool node operator. And then if you click on About here, you'll get to our docs page, which has pretty much everything I've just said, plus more information. So feel free to go read through that. I think that's it for slides.
Have you guys
solo,
tracked down? Go ahead.
I was going to say for solo stakers that's the withdrawal address that has to be connected there, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there, and like, I guess there is this question around like, is that maybe something that's like keeping them, or is there like kind of risk or security concern there with that signing that address to it, or I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
I mean, I do. So you should always be very careful of what you're signing. In this case, the message that you're signing is a plain text message that basically just contains the date. And so it's very similar to using like sign in with Ethereum, but instead of signing something that could potentially be used on chain, you're very obviously signing something that has no use on chain. So I think for us, we had to strike a balance between security, which, I mean, it would be great if a withdrawal address didn't have to be connected to our website, but on the other hand, we need proof that the person who's requesting access actually owns that specific node. And we need that because it gives us the ability to limit people's access. We limit people's access because if we just let people use the rescue node all the time, it would become a very centralizing factor in that people would connect to it and forget to disconnect. And then, we'd have thousands of validators running through one node. And when you are using the rescue node, it's not custodial. So you keep your keys on your host, but we produce the attestations and the proposals that you sign. So you're essentially just voting on the blockchain however we tell you to vote. You've delegated your voting power to us for the duration that you're connected. That's another reason we don't want people to spend too long on it. So we want people to do their own attestation.
I was going to ask when are users using it the most? Is it during hard forks? Is it when the hardware fails, or is it when they purge the clients? Or do you guys don't track it at all?
We don't track the reasons that people connect, but from sort of anecdotal experience, I'd say that we get a rush during hard forks generally if there's a bug in a client and that client, people don't want to switch clients, they just want to wait for the bug to be fixed. Sometimes people do want to switch clients and the bug is on the execution side and it takes a lot longer to switch execution clients, so they'll use the rescue node. If you're switching your consensus client, you can obviously checkpoint sync it and not worry. It takes 30 seconds, so there's no reason to use an emergency resource for that. I think the time that we saw the most usage was when I believe it was Nethermind had a consensus bug in it and sort of forked off, and we had two chains briefly, although one of them never finalized. And that was a big ordeal for us because we happened to be on the correct chain. We were running Geth, which didn't have the bug. Geth and Bisu were both on the correct chain. But we realized pretty quickly that if the bug had been slightly different, so if Geth had the bug and the canonical chain had turned out to be Nethermind and Bisu, then anyone who used the rescue node during that time period would essentially attest to a finalized epoch on a fork, which means that you can't go back to the canonical chain without getting slashed because you do a surround vote. And we figured out that the last thing in the world we should do is run a majority client. So we switched all of our execution clients to Nethermind and Bisu, and that's no longer a risk because if you do connect to the rescue node, by definition, it isn't part of a supermajority fork that's going to finalize. So you can no longer create a surround vote condition for your validator.
Hey Patches, one thing I think that's also important, maybe we can share, is when should a solo validator or a home operator not connect to the rescue node?
Sure. I think I've seen people connect because they wanted to install software updates. Software updates should never take more than like 15 minutes to install. And I think if whatever you're doing is going to take 15 minutes, you just miss an epoch or two of attestation duties. And don't waste a rescue node quota usage on it. I think if your execution client becomes corrupted, that's a good use case to connect. Some of them have gotten very fast. I believe Nethermind is ready to attest after about 2 hours on being resynced now, so that's not really necessarily a good usage of a quota token, but some of them are still a little slower, so that's potentially one. I think I've seen people who have faulty hardware use the rescue node successfully before, but it's rare. And the reason is that the validator client still has to be able to run. So the fault in the hardware has to be something that makes it temperamental, but not completely useless. And that's very rare. So I've seen it happen with people who have bad RAM. And as soon as they hit like 16 gigabytes of RAM, the operating system would crash and the computer would restart. If you just shut down your consensus client and your execution client, you'll never hit that point with the RAM, and then you can successfully use the rescue node. It's very rare, though, that a hardware issue will work like that. So I think you should use the rescue node when your execution client becomes corrupted, you want to switch clients, You know, any situation where your validator client can keep running, but your consensus and execution client are going to be offline for a long time, that's a good time to use the rescue node. Any situation where either you only need the fallback for 10 or 15 minutes, or you can't run your validator client, like you have a power outage, or your node completely dies, then there's no reason to use the rescue node.
Patches, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think I remember one Rocket Pool node operator was his hardware broke down, and then there was a sync committee that was coming, and I think we helped him start his validator on a VPS or something. I think that was it was an exceptional situation, but it was useful because it was a sync committee. And but yeah, I think that was the exception and not the rule at all.
Yes, I think there was another node operator who was about to get pummeled by a blizzard. And we did the same thing. We had him shut his node down and we moved his validator keys to a VPS for the duration of the storm.
Yeah.
Because he was really worried he would lose power, and he also had a sync committee upcoming. It might have been the same person. That is the valid use of the rescue node. If you have a natural disaster looming, or you need to like turn the electrical off in your house for a couple days, you could spin up a very cheap VPS, run a validator client on it, move your keys there. You do have to be very careful not to get slashed anytime you move your keys to another host. So all of those precautions still apply.
Yeah, I find the stories really interesting about like what cases this is most useful for, and especially with just it being born out of the merge. And I'm really curious like what the volume numbers were. I don't know if that dashboard, this stats.rescuenode.com, like what if that has like historical, data that anyone could study just from back from that time on through now. Like I don't know how far back the data goes. But yeah, just find it really fascinating to like think about when has it been useful. You talk about hard forks. Um, yeah, these individual situations. It's like really fascinating.
Yeah, so I don't have metrics on that. The dashboard only goes back 2 weeks. We're using Grafana Cloud's free tier, so we don't actually have to pay for that dashboard, which is really nice, but it also means that we can't retain a lot of data.
Mm.
So I do have a record of every time that someone has requested access for the rescue node. And that's in the form of a SQL database, and that could be mined to figure out like what time periods caused the most usage. I can tell you with a high degree of confidence that the Nethermind bug was the most users we ever saw at once. I think we had over 1,000 nodes connect or something like that. It was crazy.
And did that create load? Like how did Rescue Node handle that? Like
So rescue node is actually 5 nodes, which helps in that it distributes the load based on which client you're using. So if you're using Nimbus, you are using a node that is only used by other Nimbus nodes. And that reduces the amount of load that any individual host has. Beyond that, we saw some interesting behavior from some clients that I think just weren't necessarily tested with so many different validator clients connected to them, with so many varying numbers of validators per validator client. For the most part, though, it performed great. I think almost everyone who used it didn't report any issues. There were a few people who had trouble connecting from time to time. And fortunately, that situation resolved itself within, I think, like 6 hours or something, and everyone started disconnecting from the rescue node and everything went back to normal. But we have had individual node operators who have thousands of validators in one VC connect without any issues. We have also run into problems in the past when that's happened, because we had some of the validator clients, some of the client teams didn't really test running a validator client and a consensus client on like completely separate instances and separate data centers with a whole bunch of proxies in between and stuff like that. And we found some interesting behavior from some of them.
okay. see other questions we have here. You mentioned how hard forks kind of bring up usage. And one question I had is like with Pectra, like, or any particular hard fork. I mean, does it require you guys to update anything about how this works? I mean, obviously the clients that you're using would need to be updated when the clients update. I don't know if like anything about something major like a hard fork requires the system to change though for Rescue Node.
That's a good question. We haven't had to change anything yet.
I guess it depends
Presumably,
what's built, right? Like a
yeah,
future hard fork could be anything. So
right. So presumably, breaking changes won't be very common as Ethereum gets upgraded between the validator client and the consensus client. The client teams are very good about following a deprecation model where when one endpoint stops being useful, they sort of deprecate it. Buddha does bring up a good point, which is that 0x02 signature support will require us to make some code changes in that when we check the address of the solo validator, we look for the 0x01 prefix, and I think 0x02 prefix will essentially be the same deal where there's an address embedded at the end. So that's like a few lines of code that we have to update. But for the most part, hard forks just require us to update the clients.
okay.
How much does it cost to operate the servers?
So each of our nodes is about $100, and the service is $500 a month, plus like $8 for a VPS that we run an API on.
Do you have some way to dynamically deal with a surge of requests? For example, doing hard forks, you cannot really predict how many people will connect, right?
No, we don't. And I think part of the implicit agreement that we have with the community is that we're sort of a last ditch effort. And like, if you try and connect to the rescue node and you can't connect to the rescue node, we are sorry. We did our best. But it would require a lot of effort and a lot of funding potentially to have a dynamic scaling solution like that in place. The way that it's built certainly leaves that opportunity open. Popash did most of our infrastructure and could potentially say more about that, but we haven't ever had the problem yet where we needed just a second host due to load. So we've had 5 hosts and we have them on separate clients, and that's due to the clients behaving differently, but we've never run into an issue yet where just like having 2 Nimbus hosts would have helped.
I think I think there's probably two interesting things to mention, right? You know, early in the conversation we talked about looking at the dashboard, and there were no, at this moment in time, there were no solo validators connected to it. And as to why that might be, it could just be knowledge and advertising, right? This is really the first outreach we've been doing with the staker community to make solo stakers aware that they have access to this this break glass in case of emergency option. And one of the things I encourage anybody who's listening to this is actually try it out if you're a solo staker, right? Sign on to the website, get a credential, try it out just to familiarize yourself with the process. And in kind of a non-emergency setting, you can see that you attest correctly and produce your signed signatures, and then it just builds some confidence that you can use it in the event that you actually need it. Your node goes down, you're panicking, you get some notices from Beacon Chain, hey, wait a minute, your heart starts pumping, and it's just, if you've used the rescue node once, you kind of know, well, at least I can turn that on, and and I won't be as stressed. We all know Ethereum's a very forgiving protocol. We shouldn't be stressed, but I think it's human nature to be stressed, and it provides that little bit of comfort while you can troubleshoot.
I will note that if you request a credential just to try it out, that will count against your quota.
So this raises a question though, I guess, because I run like a Holesky instance of validators also. So like, does this work on the test net as well to like, or is it only mainnet?
So the software works on testnet, and we tested it on testnet. We don't run a testnet version of it that anyone could access just because it would cost another $500 a month, and we don't feel that the value is there. So you could, if you really wanted to poke around, you could run the rescue node software yourself. It's all open source. We publish Docker images to Docker Hub. You can essentially download and install the rescue node on your own node and then attest through that just to play around with it. But there isn't a public service at the moment.
I'm gonna be taking a contrarian
Okay.
view.
Yeah, one of the questions I had
Ren
here
is
was like, what are
talking.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I'm gonna be
sorry.
taking a contrarian view. Yeah, here.
Yeah.
Does the rescue node project create a centralization, some kind of a centralization form here for just rescuing stakers? And if so, would there be some ways to improve upon it? So maybe patches you could take it.
Yeah, I touched on this a little on the slides, and it's the reason that we have strict quota and usage limitations. If everyone's connected to the rescue node, then everyone's validating through one node, right? And we're the ones that are generating your attestations and proposals, and we don't like that. So we've limited access so that a given node operator can access the rescue node like less than 10% of the year. I think it's like 1 month out of the year or something like that in total. The main centralization concern would be during Black Swan events. Let's say that there is another consensus bug and there's no supermajority client this time. And so we lose finalization on the 2 hard forks that exist, the unintentional hard forks. If people start flocking to the rescue node because they assume that we're on the correct fork, then they're essentially saying that we are on the correct fork, and the correct fork becomes what consensus says, right? So it could be sort of just that whichever clients are form a new majority are the ones that decide which fork is correct and which one finalizes in that case. And then later, if people find that that actually was the buggy fork, you're stuck on that fork. So I think there are certain times that it is not good to use the rescue node. One of them, the main one, is if there's an Ethereum-wide issue. We will do our best to shut the service off in such a scenario, but it's very hard to detect automatically. I would rather everyone goes offline than accidentally finalizes a fork of Ethereum. I think that the realistic scenario there, though, is that not enough people could pile onto the rescue node to actually push the needle one way or the other. You would have to essentially form a supermajority on one of the clients or on one of the 2 forks to do that. And I think the rescue node, as much as as capable as I think it is, would collapse under load well before that many people piled onto it.
What if I'm like a giga billionaire and I'm running a large amount of keys? Can I all point them on the rescue node at once?
Yes and no. We haven't really looked for what the realistic limit is for the number of keys that you can load into a single validator client and point at the rescue node. There have been sort of artificial limits that have popped up in the past. I think Nimbus would cram all of the validator IDs into one giant request and send it to the rescue node. And the Nimbus BN didn't mind getting that many keys in one request, but our middleware, which is Cloudflare and HA proxy, said that the request was too long and would reject it. I think if you have more than like 1,000 validators, I can't promise that you can connect. We've definitely seen up to 1,000 connect successfully, though.
Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, hopefully somebody that's running 1,000 validators has their own fallback client somewhere else, right? It's I think we were really envisioning, solo and home stakers that only have a few validators on a single piece of hardware, and just it doesn't make an economic sense to build a backup system. And so this provides kind of, the life raft model for them that, so they don't sweat, they don't panic about losing attestations, even though we know the financial impact is minor, right? It provides that level of comfort to buy them some time to think clearly as to why their node isn't operating, and to troubleshoot it and fix the bug or repair the hardware.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think if you are a whale or you have a lot of validators that you're getting income from, you have the resources to set up your own redundancy. You can run a beacon node in AWS as well as a beacon node in DigitalOcean for, having completely separate um, reliable sources of attestation data. And then you can run your validator client at home and connect to both of those beacon nodes. It'll cost you twice as much as it costs someone who is a smaller operator to just have one node. But you have, 1,000 validator keys. You can afford the 2x cost factor on your hardware.
Do you think that the centralization aspect can be solved by having a rescue node, some kind of add-on on top of the smart node, so it's not just you guys running it, but the whole Rocket Pool network would be running nodes that people can connect to, or maybe even node set could be a node provider.
Yes and no. So with the way that the consensus clients currently work, there's a security issue with using a stranger's node. And the reason that the rescue node works is that the people who are maintaining it are supposedly reputable. I'm one of them. I don't really think I'm that reputable, but people seem to trust me anyway. If you were to just use a random person's consensus client, you would be trusting them not to interfere with your proposal fees. And you would also sort of just be trusting that they are actually running the software that they say they're running. And it's hard to trust random people. There's been some talk about adding signatures to the prepare beacon proposer request. That would solve that. I've talked to a few people about it. I don't know how popular of an idea it is. If that happened, then you're sort of just trusting that they won't sabotage you instead of stealing from you, because they could just ignore your prepare beacon proposer request if they don't like it, but they can't really interfere with the fee recipient that you set anymore. So there are sort of ways that we can make that more possible, but with the current state of the beacon API specification, it isn't really possible.
Cool. Just looking to see if there's any other questions that we had here for the team. Anything we didn't cover yet? Okay, this has been great. So yeah, I think you've been pretty good, like pretty clear with like where to go to learn more, but rescuenode.com, right? That's the place to go for people. Seems pretty well documented, and the steps to do it you showed there earlier. So I think if there's nothing else, we could be good then. Any other questions?
I think regarding the centralization issues,
Mhm.
I agree with Patches. I think one thing we discussed at some point was that VCs could refuse to sign the prepared block by the BN because they can inspect the Coinbase address, the fee recipient. But I think most VCs, I may misremembering. I think most VCs just don't enforce it. So if you're using MEV, it's signed, so you're safe. But if you're using the prepare beacon proposer, I think basically the beacon node can send you whatever it wants, the block to sign. I don't remember if it sends the full block or the header with the fee recipient, and that the validator client can validate the fee recipient, and in theory could refuse to sign it. But I think what happens is that they sign it. And regarding the decentralization, I think other trusted entities, if of course using the word trust in Ethereum, it's kind of a dirty word, but I don't know, Ethereum Foundation, uh, Beacon Chain, I don't know, maybe a few entities in the same way that they run the the Beacon state to bootstrap the Beacon node. There's a degree of trust in that as well. Basically, we're trusting um, Beacon providers that their Beacon state is legitimate. So yeah.
Yeah, so I remember when we started this project, I did look through and try to determine which clients would refuse to sign a block and which wouldn't. I have to give a shout out to Lodestar for being, I think, the only one that let me configure that at runtime with a command line flag. Very cool. Most of them didn't do any validation. They sort of just trusted the block that the consensus node provided. I think Prism logged a warning message but signed it anyway. I think in that case, it's sort of like the money's already lost thing. You might as well sign it and hope that it's an address that the user is okay with. And that's sort of what the comment in the Prism source code said. It was like, we'll just sign this block and pray. So I don't, if we do refuse to sign it in that scenario, it just means that nobody gets the money. Maybe that's enough to prevent people from even trying, right? That's the hope.
I have
And
a question for you. Sorry. I have a question. So this is run as a public good. The GMC funds it. How much actual maintenance does it take you guys, and how much of that time that you put into Rescue Node is you spending extra time making things better rather than like actually like MVP maintaining it?
I've been doing most of the maintenance, so I can answer that. We stopped developing it after we added solo staker support. The two changes since then have both been from community members who wanted to contribute, which is really cool. The majority of the maintenance has just been keeping the clients up to date. Every now and then I have to like delete some caches and reload them, refresh them, stuff like that. I'd say I probably spend 2 hours a month maintaining it. It operates very well without even looking at it. Every now and then we'll get an alert that one of the disks are filling up or something like that, and we'll have to check on that. For the most part, though, it's pretty hands-off. I think I check the dashboards once a week and see if there's anything that I need to do urgently. And again, our sort of implicit agreement with the community here is that if you are having an emergency and you're able to connect to the rescue node and it helps you, that's great. If you're having an emergency and for some reason you can't connect to the rescue node, even if it's our fault, I'm sorry. It's supposed to be like a last ditch effort. I don't want to spend too much time maintaining it, so there is a bit of a trade-off here.
Cool. Any other comments or questions or anything? We have.
yeah, I suppose
Sorry.
I was going to say the one thing I'll add just on the previous conversation is, I think Pat just said it best. It's kind of trust minimized. There are some trust assumptions. The documentation page that Pat just showed, you can access directly from the Rescue Node website, and it's worth reading through. And I think the thought about, could the Rescue Node steal rewards? And I think one of the things that's important is, the reward stream is is bifurcated or at least split among maybe three pots of money: the consensus layer rewards, which unless they correct me on here, there's no way that the rescue node could steal the consensus layer rewards. And then in the execution rewards, right, there's MEV and there's the tips, right? And about the only thing we could do is for the native block producers that are relying on us is still the tips, right? If you're using the relay, we can't really touch the MEV, at least that I'm aware of. So now you're kind of just, well, it's a smaller risk profile that we could actually become malicious and attack. And so the trust is not that we'll take all the rewards or trust us with all of them, but trust us, we won't steal the tips. And then you can make a risk assessment as to whether or not that's worth using the rescue node or not for your for your assurance during a downtime.
Yeah, so I just wanted to leave a huge shout out to Patches. Patches is usually very generous in the way he describes our participation in the rescue node. And honestly, Patches has been the driving force. If I helped and I did some arguably important parts, but if it wasn't for Patches, that I would never be able to get this off the ground. So Patches is amazing, and kudos, thank you. And I think we all owe him a huge debt of gratitude. So thank you, Patches. You're awesome.
I mean, I just executed on your brilliant idea, but we could sit here and argue all day about this.
There you go. Yeah, you're very generous, and thank you. But you're the heart and soul behind the rescue note. So kudos again.
If any of you ever have the opportunity to work with Popash, I highly recommend it. You'll feel really good about yourself afterwards.
Patches also apparently has a fantastic ability to deflect any
Yeah,
comment.
it's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, whoever works the most on this, thank you for building it. Thank you for sharing what you've built with the community, because I think like what we said at the beginning is true, that it is a valuable public good that is great to have out there for everybody. So yeah, it's great to have this, and we're happy to partner with you all to support it. So cool. Well, let's see here, POAP, let's talk about that because we have one as usual, right? So Remy, if we want to put that slide up, we have a community called POAP for anyone who made it all the way with us to the end here. And the directions are going to be, so the POAP is minted on Arbitrum, and any of the payment methods that you see on the slide there can be used. So it's 0.0009 ETH. That can be done on Arbitrum, Optimism Base, or Ethereum mainnet. And then you'll get that POAP. It's through an airship, so it's just like sending the ETH to that address. No signing necessary, and then it mints to your address. So yeah, have at it. If there's anything else, like questions for the team, feel free to reach out about Rescue Node here. All the links were shared, rescuenode.com. And then also for future community calls, definitely reach out to the EthStaker community on Discord, or however you want to contact us to suggest calls. And then I would also want to make a plug for a special live stream we'll be doing in a week and a half now at this point for the Haleski Pectra fork upgrade. And so we'll be doing that on February 24th at 21:30 UTC. So excited to have that coming too. And we'll see you all then, and any other community calls that we schedule before or after that. So I think we're good. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.